Hello again. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today for Deliberate Indifference, Wisconsin. This is poor Debbie is trying to hold down the fort here while I'm off with sick dogs and everything else. I was here this weekend. I think I recorded 3 or 4 videos, and one of them turned out. So, poor Debbie, like I said. Yeah, take it as it comes. All right. So, I've just got a very short story to relate here in very general terms. Um, and it's something like this. I had a hearing. This is your Ben hearing face. My dancing with the dirty dog jacket. Um, I had a hearing with the Department of Corrections. And this is just generally speaking what this is the WERC, Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission. It's basically the civil service court for the state of Wisconsin employees and some municipal employees by rule and whatever agreement. Okay. So WERC, and this is there's some really great things that have got to come out of that. And I sure wish we could play this video recording, but we'll see what happens. Um, so one great thing, by the way, about the WERC is that they have this deadline for the judges to put the decisions in there because the goal here is to get the employees back to work or to get them terminated and then they can sue or whatever, but they're sort of in this grievance limbo until this happens here, and that's it's fascinating. You rarely have a judge who's got a 45-day time limit, um, which is pretty amazing. Okay, so Department of Corrections. The issue here is simply this: there is a thing in Wisconsin called an appointing authority. Okay, we've heard about that. It's in the Novak case. We've heard about that in other places where by statute there is who disciplines state employees, right? Who can terminate a state employee? And the reason that we came to this is we said, hey, these ALJs are seemingly committing significant malpractice, and I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about 20 years in the past. It's documented there in these decisions. For example, demanding a complaint, trying to frisk a complainant when they get into the hearing. Um, that's outrageous and should never have happened, and that person needs an apology. But also, that ALJ shock should have been named, shamed, and it should be in his personnel file, um, because there should be some, you know, what do you call that? The people of the state of Wisconsin should not be pigs hunting around for truffles for misconduct of state officials. That should be clear, just like the publication of the Brady list in Milwaukee. Please put a comment if you want me to do the Brady list that came out here in Milwaukee. I think it's fascinating. It's the list of all the police officers um, that have, let's say, issues with veracity in the past and that are documented by the city of Milwaukee. So I think that's something that it's a personal interest of mine, the Milwaukee Police Department and police accountability, and just in terms of um, due process, particularly. But I know it strays away from this channel a little bit. Okay, here's the headline. We get into this hearing, and they don't bring the warden and they don't bring the secretary of the Department of Corrections, I think for good reasons. But they do bring a assistant administrator of the Division of Adult Institutions. Okay, and you will all remember Percy. I always think, of course, Percy Gorange, that side whiskered chap, but that's PG Woodhouse. This is Douglas Percy, the former assistant administrator, who then got sidelined into another thing after the Novak one. If they're related, I couldn't say. But I will say that we do know that there are two assistant administrators to the administrator, and that each one of them has a sort of area that they supervise, and they're basically the assistant administrators are the liaison between the warden and the administrator. And the key concept here is by law, the warden is more or less the king of the castle, um, the emperor of the institution, um, geez, the dictator of the dungeon. Man, I could do better with more time, I'm sure. That is to say that they have all but complete police powers of the state of Wisconsin at their fingertips in order to protect the welfare and safety of the people outside of the prison and the inmates inside of the prison, and to fulfill their mandate to confine people as ordered by the state's courts. Makes sense. I mean, it's confining people is no joke. Putting human beings in cages is a big deal, and to do that, you've got to have power. That all of those things make sense. One of the powers that they have is to hire and fire the people that are beneath them. Well, by custom policy and whatever else, and that's been in place since the 70s, I think. But custom policy and anything else, the DOC just has really the secretary is the one that makes that decision. And you don't have to take my word for it. They have this official document called a routing slip that shows all of the HR that it went through. Um, assistant administrator, the HR person, Carrie Beyer, Kelly Brown, the deputy secretary, the secretary, oh, the Office of Human Resources, and the depart. There's somebody else too. For diversity purposes too. We're at like 10 people that are above the warden that are making the decision, and the warden, although he's signing the letter still because they're pretending to follow the law, the warden and the decisions that are being made are not in fact the warden's at all. Except the problem is that under law, the warden is the one who is to make the decision, and that's 230.05 if you want to look at it. Some might. It's also, by the way, that's in the civil service. Uh, that explains that one. Um, and then the power of the warden, I believe, is in chapter 301. It may be 300, but I think it's in 301, pretty early on. And that's under superintendents and warden. So, right after oath of offices. And the whole point of again, this is that the warden is the one because they're the ones who actually know what's going on. And Sue Novak testified to this. She was shocked at how little power a warden actually had. Well, that was under Kevin Carr. And to be clear, everything that's happened under Kevin Carr has been continued under Jared Hoy and others. Now, let's look at where this falls apart. Okay, because Kevin Carr, as you remember, in my opinion, walked out the back door and let all of these deaths at the Columbia Correctional Institution fall on the feet of the warden. And the warden and other correctional officers were criminally charged. And we saw this big, we played it for you. There was a statement by the sheriff, and he was, showing the zero tolerance and everything. Well, Kevin Carr wasn't being charged. And so that's part of the problem is that the statute in terms of responsibility to the warden is goes to him, but in terms of the power to do the actual job and to control things and for staffing and for everything else, that's not actually up to them. So they're just a figurehead fall guy is really what's going on. The problem is that the law in the state of Wisconsin doesn't reflect. So we had this witness up there and I'm asking basically, hey, witness, let's go to this chapter here. Does it say here anywhere that the secretary of the Department of Corrections can fire people? No, it says the appointing authority. Okay, got it. All right. So, but you're not the appointing authority. No. Okay. So why? Just can you explain to me why you are participating in this decision when the law says that it's okay? It's by policy. So we go on, and I basically am asking him why, when up to and including how did it make you feel when you were violating the law, going above the warden? At some point, the Department of Corrections person came out and said, this is what we do. It's policy. It's a custom. And I don't bring this up merely to pick on the Department of Corrections, but I bring this up, I think, which is the larger problem in Wisconsin. And I suspect strongly that this has been going on before Carr. But I think under Carr is when it was totally abandoned, and he pretends that anybody but the secretary is making all these decisions. And again, the problem is that they're acting like we're the decision of the governor and the Secretary of Corrections. And many judges, especially ALJs, go along with this, go along with this, go along with this, go along, because they have to, because they don't have to. I say they do, they must, because otherwise we would have evidence of this, of the statutes being followed here. And again, much like your average criminal, we can infer their intent by the fact that it took me 2 years basically to crack this code before we now regularly, and I just keep regularly bringing this argument up, and now they finally identified that it says that they've got us all wrong, but basically the Secretary of the Department of Corrections can delegate some of their powers. Okay, that's what they're hanging their hat on. And the problem is that when you delegate your powers, you don't have them anymore. And the theory that they're running under is that I can give some of my powers to the warden, but in fact, I retain all those powers, even though I've given them to someone. That's not normally what delegate or give or transfer or in writing. That's not what those mean, normally speaking. So I think we're going to have an interesting time figuring out what that means with the Department of Corrections here. But again, it really could be almost anything here where a policy or a custom uh, trumps a law. And there's nobody to blame, frankly, than the administrative law judges, the everybody who goes along with this to get along. Um, the fact is that the black letter law of Wisconsin or any other state is that the statute, meaning the duly elected law, duly by the duly elected representatives. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's the law. Is those people who get to have the final word in what the rules are, and not the governor. And that's essentially what's happening here. Is that the governor is saying, and is it totally surprising that the judges who work for the governor are going to be likely to, and in fact seem to, go along with the governor's interpretation that the governor can interpret the law however he wants? Doesn't matter what the law says, it's the policy and custom here. And the fact that that can even be uttered out law in the state of Wisconsin, to me, I mean, I think that we need serious enforcement on those issues, and there's a lot less petty crimes that I think that are not as serious. And it's a serious, even just saying that out loud, frankly, that there needs to be a investigation. There needs to be, and people need to be held accountable, because it's not okay. Think about how many people have been fired from Department of Corrections institutions illegally, under my theory, where the secretary is making the decision and not the appointing authority. And see, this is exactly like what we have happening at the Department of Workforce Development, where the judge is in theory making the decision, but in fact, they're not making the decision by policy, custom, and whatever else. And they're gaslighting everybody about what's actually going on and making you think that they're following the rules and telling you that they're following the rules, and having the warden sign his name on the decision, having the judge sign their name on the decision, when in fact something very much the opposite is going on. So here we are. That is the state of Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin in a nutshell. And if that's how things used to be, they need to change today. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your message. I appreciate the warm messages. I do. And for those of you who don't like Hitchcock cross examination, I totally understand. Just to briefly say, for some reason there's a video out there that's called "The County Quits After One Witness," and that one, people either love it or they think it's clickbait. And I just more power to you. That's all I can say. More power to you. Thanks for sticking with it. Keep you informed.